So let's talk about the basics of solving quadratic equations by taking the square root. Before we get started, I want you to tell me what the opposite of squared is. So you can see right here, I have x squared. If I want to get rid of the squared, what is the opposite of squared? The opposite of squared is square root. So if I take the square root of something that's squared, it equals just x. Notice that the squared went away and the square root went away, and all you're left with is x. So the opposite of squared is square root. Pause the video and write that down. So you can see right here I've got the equation x squared equals 25, and I want to solve for x. In other words, I'm asking what number can I put in for x and square it, and it'll give me 25. Well, we just said the opposite of squared is square root. So for me to get rid of this squared right here, all I have to do is square root both sides. And so x equals, and what do we say the square root of 25 is? It's not just 5, it's also negative 5. And so those are your two solutions, negative 5 and positive 5. Okay, in quadratic equations, solutions are the same thing as roots, which are the same as zeros. And so I could say 5 and negative 5 are my solutions, my roots, my zeros. I could also say they're my x-intercepts. So on the screen I've got 4 different quadratic equations that we're going to solve by taking the square root. On this first one, I've got x squared equals 9. What is the opposite of squared right here? It's square root, so I'm going to get rid of the squared by square rooting both sides. And so x equals, the square root of 9 is 3, and x also equals negative 3. So there are my two solutions. Okay, let's look at this one right here. I've got x squared equals 0. And so to get rid of the squared, I take the square root of both sides. And so x equals, the square root of 0 is just 0 because there's no such thing as negative 0. So there's only one solution in that case. Okay, let's look at this one. X squared minus 16 equals 0. So I can't take the square root of both sides on this one yet because I have not isolated the x squared. So the first thing I'm going to do is add 16 to both sides. And so I have x squared equals 16. And now you can see I have the variable on the left and the number on the right. So now I can get rid of the squared by taking the square root of both sides. So x equals, the square root of 16 is 4, but the square root of 16 is also negative 4. And so those are my two solutions. Let's look at this last one. Why don't you pause and see if you can do this one on your own. Let me read it to you. 2x squared minus 18 equals 0. The first thing I need to do is isolate the x squared. I need to get it where 2x squared is the only thing to the left of the equal sign. So I'll add 18 on both sides, and I get 2x squared equals 18. Okay, and so now I have 2x squared equals 18. What do I do to get rid of this 2? This 2 right here is being multiplied by the x, so I'm going to divide 2 on both sides. And so I have x squared equals 9. Okay, now I'm down to an equation x squared equals 9 that looks just like this one, and this one. So to get rid of the squared, I square root both sides. And so I have x equals, the square root of 9 is 3. And I have x equals, the square root of 9 is also negative 3. And so my two solutions are 3 and negative 3 on that one. All right, here are our last two problems. So here I've got x minus 1 all being squared equals 4. Now what do we say we do to get rid of squared? What is the opposite of squared? Square root. So I'm going to square root the left there and square root the right. Okay, now notice what happens. The square root, and the squared go away, leaving me just x minus 1 on the left. And that equals whatever the square root of 4 is. Well, there's 2 square root of 4. The square root of 4 equals 2, but it also equals negative 2, so I need to write 2 equations. X minus 1 equals negative 2. So notice I wrote x minus 1 here and here because the square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of 4 is also negative 2. And now I just need to solve each of these equations. So I will add 1 on both sides, and I get x equals 3. And I will add 1 on both sides here, and so I get x equals negative 1. And so those two are my answers. Okay, so pause the video and try and see if you can work this one all by yourself. You're trying to solve for x. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is I need to isolate the x minus 2 squared on the left by itself. So I need to get this 5 to go away, and I need to get this negative 25 on the right of the equal sign. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 25 on both sides. And so I have 5 times x minus 2 all squared equals 25. And now I need to get this 5 to go away. Well, 5 is being multiplied, and the opposite of multiply is to divide 5 on both sides. And so I have x minus 2 all squared equals, and 25 divided by 5 is 5. Okay? Now I need to take the square root of both sides because I'm trying to get rid of this squared right here. And so I square root the left of the equal sign, and I square root the right of the equal sign. And so I have x minus 2 equals whatever the square root of 5 is. Let's just write it as square root of 5. And then let's write x minus 2 equals the negative square root of 5 like that. Okay? So then I will add 2 on both sides here. And so I have x equals the square root of 5 plus 2. So stop and type this in your calculator. Make sure you do not put the plus 2 under the radical. In other words, it should be square root of 5, close the parentheses, plus 2. And so when I type that in the calculator, I get x equals, square root of 5 plus 2 is 4.24, and I just rounded, 4.24. To get that, I rounded. Okay, let's go over here on the right side, and I need to add 2 on both sides here. So I will add 2 to both sides. And so I get x equals negative square root of 5 plus 2. So you need to type this in your calculator just like you see it. Negative square root of 5 plus 2. So type that in. Type negative sign and then a square root of 5. Close the parentheses, plus 2. Okay, so when you do that, I've got... So when I type that in, I got x equals negative 0.24. And I rounded 2 places past the decimal. X equals negative 0.24.